My name is Ralf Friedrichs. I'm an author, an addiction recovery coach, a life coach, and a host of this show, the Take Your Life Back Today show. Diverting drug addicts and people with mental illness from prison into the proper care they desperately need. Despite a failing crime rate, Virginia continues to spend more than $1 billion a year on corrections. A commission appointed by Governor McAuliffe, I believe it was then governor, considered restoring parole as a means of reducing the prison population, but recommended instead that judges consider punishments other than prison. Charlottesville and Albemarle County have been doing just that, diverting people convicted of possessing or using drugs. Once a heroin addict, Herb Dickinson says he's drug-free and helping others thanks to the alternative sentence for his crime. Herb Dickinson spent most of his adulthood life addicted to drugs. He says, I was a heroin user for 30 years and caused a lot of crime, he recalls. In order to use it every day, which I had to have money to purchase it. I could steal, I could lie, I could manipulate. Whatever it took, I did. He was in and out of the state prison for years, each time costing taxpayers thousands of dollars, according to Nina Etani, senior assistant to the Commonwealth's Attorney's Office. She says it's resources from the police department every time a police officer has to be dispatched to deal with an individual engaged in some sort of criminal behavior, she explains. It's an impact and cost on merchants whose items are being stolen or a victim of crime who now has to deal with criminal behavior being directed towards them. It's jail staff time and energy in booking individuals, bed space at the jail, court resources. Locking up non-violent criminals was also a problem at the regional jail, according to Charlottesville Judge Robert Downer. Back in 2001, he says, when I first became the judge of the General District Court, the jail was so horribly overcrowded that the gymnasium was actually used to house inmates, especially on weekends. And the city's public defender, Liz Mortog, points out that innocent children and spouse suffered when their breadwinner was locked up. If people are counting on somebody to be going to work, when they get incarcerated, it has a complete ripple effect throughout the entire family, she explains. It's really difficult. Children seeing their parents get locked up. It's a problem, she says. So the community decided to offer an alternative called a drug court. Judge Ted Hawkshire oversaw the program that began by looking at personnel information about a convicted criminal. His or her record of addiction, mental health problems, lack of education, lack of job skills, and traumatic experiences. Using those and other details, studies had shown it was possible to predict with considerably certainty whether they posed a risk to the public safety or might do well in local program rather than state prison. Hawkshire heard the case against Herb Dickinson, assessed the risk he posed, and explained that he could be held in the local jail enrolled in the intensive drug treatment program. Given your history, you're going to be out selling drugs. Then you need to be out of the community, Hawkshire told Dickinson. But if you think you can get your act together and complete this therapeutic community program, which is going to be very difficult for you given your behavior and your attitudes, I'll look at it again. But if you wash out of it, get kicked out of it, or withdraw, you're going down the road of prison. You're going to do your time, he said. Dickinson was willing to try it. He wanted to avoid more time in state prison, and he'd become an embarrassment to his entire family. I've been a major embarrassment to my family, he says. All of my siblings went to college and had good jobs and took care of my mother, whereas I was taken from them. And, well, that went on for many years. I mean, my mother was the biggest enabler you could have. Her son never did anything wrong. It was always someone else's fault. And let her believe that, I said. She passed away in 2000. As a matter of fact, I went to court that particular morning, and when I got back, she was laying on the floor. She had just passed maybe 15, 20 minutes earlier, and I always blame myself to some sort of degree. Hoping to redeem himself, to do something positive in his mother's memory, he committed to the program. Folks, this is true. Virginia is in the midst of experimenting trying sentences other than state prison to address nonviolent crime. Some offenders have a drug problem and are allowed to enroll in the intensive treatment program. Others have been diagnosed with serious mental and illnesses and are given a choice treatment or time behind bars. But as Sandy Hussman reports, many communities don't offer these lower cost life-saving options. Alternative sentences advocates Albie LaFave of Charlottesville Public Defender's Office, Senior Assistant Commonwealth's Attorney Nina Antony, Judge Robert Downer, and Attorney Robert Tracci of Charlottesville Public Defender all got their heads together. 65-year-old Herb Dickerson was once addicted to heroin for the most of his adulthood. He was in and out of prison, but a new program in Charlottesville allowed him to do time in a local jail, taking part of the intensive program treatment called Therapeutic Community. That was probably the foremost thing that changed my life, he explains, because I started looking at the behaviors and the thinking process that led to the decisions I was making to get into trouble in the first place. It changed the way I thought, he explains. After 19 months, he graduated, got a job at a local restaurant, and volunteered at a Haven, a homeless shelter, and social service center. He's been clean for 17 years and inspires pride in his 4 children and 6 grandkids. Judge Ted Hochshire, who has sentenced Dickerson to the intensive drug treatment rather than prison, was also pleased with the outcome. We clapped for him. A light went on in his head, and when he was going through his program, that he had to lead a different life, and he chose to just do that, Hochshire recalls. For the last, I would say, at least 15 years, he's been a leader in our recovering community here, sponsoring people in NA, helping people through crisis, helping to run the Haven. The population there has been supervised by him somewhat. I was able to watch it work and be part of the working, and that was a real delight for me. It was one of the things I enjoyed most about the job, said the judge. Since then, Charlottesville recently launched another program to divert people who are mentally ill from prison to treatment instead. Commonwealth's attorney Robert Tracci says the first person to qualify clearly needed care and not incarceration. He was a veteran who was discharged a firearm into a dwelling, and he had called 911 several times. He had called. He wanted help, and by the time emergency services got there, he surrendered to the law enforcement, and it clearly was a call for help. And it was very emotional when he saw other people there in uniform he could identify with. It was clear to us immediately that this docket should exist for people like that. And he and Robert Downer add that charges are not dismissed. Instead, someone with mental illness will get treatment under court supervision. These folks, if they're going to enter the docket, are going to be making a commitment to come to court twice a month in front of me, and we're going to have a discussion about what progress they are making, and hopefully if they are making progress toward the things that have been set up for them as a treatment plan. The hope is that once they get into a pattern of taking their medication regularly, seeing people who can help them with their mental illness, that the pattern will continue after we're done with the therapeutic docket. As a reward, the conviction may be reduced from a felony to a misdemeanor. It may end up being a suspended jail sentence, or it may be a complete dismissal. Not only is it a better approach, Tachi said, but it saves taxpayers money. It costs about $30,000 to keep someone in a state prison for 1 year, and Tracci says people have likely to break the law again when they are released, unless their underlying problems are addressed and solved. It's very disturbing to a citizen who may find somebody under their porch because they're homeless and they're looking for some place warm to stay. Putting them in jail is certainly going to stop that. They'll be warm. But that's not the very effective punishment, because it's not dealing with the problem itself. It's punishing them for being under your porch. For all those reasons, you might expect alternative sentence to prove popular statewide, but a recent survey showed that it wasn't so. UVA law professor Brandon Garrett and colleagues surveyed judges and found only 42% of low-risk defendants getting supervised probation, drug or mental health treatment. In some courtrooms, the rate was as low as 7%. One reason? Judges didn't believe the risk assessment system created by the state was effective. There was a sizable minority of judges who hate the idea and said, we don't consult psychics. I have a gavel, not a crystal ball, Garrett recalls. A majority of judges didn't trust the official method of risk assessment, but Garrett says some were unsure of what to do next. There's nothing in these guidelines or recommendations that give judges guidance on what to do if someone is at low risk. They're eligible for alternative sentences, but the judges don't have information on whether this is someone who would benefit from supervised probation. Is this someone who really needs treatment in a structured environment or jail? And finally, some judges said they'd like to hand down alternative sentence, but their communities lack programs for the people with drug or mental health problems. That's why Garrett is recommending that Virginia give more training to judges and fund more programs to help nonviolent, low-risk offenders to avoid prison and become more productive members of society. Here's a side note. Since we spoke with Professor Garrett, he has taken a new job. He is now a distinguished professor of law at Duke University. Call me at 844-405-HELP. Together we can help each other take our lives back. Remember to be good to yourselves and always be good to others. A simple smile to a total stranger can change that stranger's life forever. And believe me, it could change your life as well. Trust me on that. And remember that God loves you very much, and just go out and let God guide and direct you, and you'll find out that your days will be better. May God bless you. Take good care. Bye-bye.